Okay, I will make a start. So, good morning and welcome to this session on transforming community health and well-being. So, my name's Andre Carolus and I'm the chair of Haveringland Parish Meeting, which is our local parish. So, welcome. Now, it's a privilege to be here in this remarkable space, a building that has undergone transformation itself and now serves both as church and community in fresh ways. And as we begin, I'd like to think about one overarching question. What might it look like for a rural church to become a genuine community hub for the well-being, and particularly in partnership with others? And I think the starting point is understanding the rural reality, and I think we heard some of that earlier on. So today we're going to focus on something very practical, how rural churches can contribute meaningfully to the well-being of their communities, especially in contexts where isolation, limited resources and small volunteer bases can create real challenges. The session will begin with a brief introduction from our panel, and that'll be about what they are doing for well-being and perhaps maybe one key takeaway. Now that's then going to be followed by a panel discussion, and I'll put a few questions to our panel. And then towards the end, I'll allow 15 to 20 minutes or so for questions from the audience. So please do think of a few questions rather than me just kind of dropping it towards the end of the session. So what we would like, please, is for the conversation to be constructive, honest, hopeful, and exploring what works, what is realistic and what is practical, and how churches can collaborate effectively with others. So the panel aims to explore how rural churches can support the community health and well-being, share some real practical examples and lessons learned, highlight partnership opportunities, encourage realistic next steps, and inspire confidence and collaboration. And with that in mind, I'd like to invite our panel members, please, to introduce themselves, explain about their work, and how it connects to the community health and well-being in the rural context. Now, I know Nigel has already introduced himself, so I don't know if you want to add anything else to what you've already said, Nigel.
Well, I will. I mean, obviously, I'll tell you who I am, and you know my role here. I've mentioned the pilot programme, I suppose is the best way of describing it. We've tried over the last year, this programme called Only Connect, and we can obviously say more about our experiences on that if that's of interest. The other thing which I didn't mention, which I should in respect say thank you to Andre for, is we set up some years ago initially a friends group for the church. You'll be familiar with these, I'm sure, and we called it Haveringland Together. But it wasn't a conventional friends group. Yes, it was there to raise money for the ongoing costs, particularly maintenance and the building of the church. But we took the view that it was very important to try and involve the community in running things here. Some of those were about raising money, but many of them were about bringing the community together. So we developed Haveringland Together really as, I suppose, a community organisation based at the church that was there to raise money, but also to organise things and to gradually engage the population. One of the things I think that we did in the run-up to, as we called it, part 2 of the project, was do a door-to-door survey of people. And we actually asked them, gave them a list of things they might be interested in, just to get some idea of the support that might be there. Well, perhaps not surprisingly, that support hasn't always materialised, but it was a wonderful steer towards the sorts of activities and events that people would support here. And I think it proved very, very helpful in us gaining further funding from government source for our Part 2 project. I'll just mention that because I think that may be of interest to people. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.
Hello, good morning. My name's Will Mills and I am the manager of the Horsted Centre. The Horsted Centre is a children's outdoor activity and adventure centre and is housed in the old rectory adjacent to Horsted All Saints Church. And as a charity with our own Christian identity and strong affiliation with the local church, we've been looking for ways to to extend our welcome and to share the things that we're passionate about more with our local community, rather than just host school residentials year round. And so I guess I'm here to talk about the ways in which we've managed to do that through a series of community events in collaboration with our local parish council and with our local church council as well. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lucy Allen and I work for Norfolk and Waveney Mind, which is a mental health charity nationally, but we're the local arm of that. And we have lots and lots of projects and events. We have the rest hubs, which are points of connection in communities, not so much rural communities, but trying to not be Norwich-centric and having these hubs in Aylsham and Thetford, Great Yarmouth and Kings Lynn, as well as Norwich. And through those rest hubs, our drop-ins are available to support people around their mental health, lots of signposting. We do lots of connecting up with other organisations in those communities. My role is in with the community projects team, and I work on a project all around nature connection, so supporting people to build a relationship with nature for improved health and well-being, knowing that we are part of nature, and wanting to support people to take part in workshops and activities to do so. And that's where I met Nigel, is through the Norfolk Green Care Network. So I joined the pilot program to offer walks from the church, knowing that the church is surrounded by nature, but actually how often do we get together and walk just with the aim of taking notice and tuning in. So that's my role. Mind is much bigger than just me, so I'm happy to share more about that as well. Oh, you've got one, great.
I've got one. Good morning, my name's Robin Hepburn. I'm the charity director for YANA, You Are Not Alone. Charity is founded in Norfolk in 2008 in the wake of a number of suicides among the farming community, and we are a standalone charity now serving across Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex and Cambridgeshire, predominantly aiming to support the mental health of the agricultural community, our beleaguered farming community, but also associated rural businesses. And we do that in three ways. One, through a helpline that people can call, open with somebody at the other end of, not a chat bot or anything else like that, but a human being at the end between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday to Friday, backed up by the opportunity to leave a message and have somebody call you back if it's outside those hours. About 60% of those who call us need more than 40 minutes on a call to talk about the stresses and strains that they may be facing. So we also then fund counselling sessions. We have a great network of counsellors across the region that we can refer those to. And then we put around that facilitating mental health first aid training to try and build the resilience of the community. Now, having said all that, I'm feeling I'm a bit of a fraud sat here. I was only appointed in August of last year. I don't come from a farming background, and my knowledge of Norfolk is limited to moving here in 2019. I worship in Norwich Cathedral because I live in Norwich, but prior to that I lived in the smallest parish in Kent, and was organist in the church there, and was also a church warden for 20 years with an electoral roll of 29 in the City of London. And we undertook the renovation and reimagining of a redundant city church that was closed following the Templeman report in the 1990s. So I'm not really sure what I can add, but I'm here.
Thank you. And on that note, welcome to Haveringland. And you are right, your parish of 20, what was it, 20? 29 is a lot smaller than obviously what we have here. Welcome to Norfolk. Nigel mentioned a little bit earlier on about my role as the chair of Haveringland Together, and I'm hoping that when we go into the questions and answers session, you might be thinking about, well, what sort of things can we do in the church and what has happened, and I can give you a little bit of insight as to what we actually did, what we thought worked, what perhaps didn't work. A lot of hard work does go into this sort of stuff. Sometimes, as I say, it comes off, sometimes it doesn't come off as what we would expect. And sometimes we do come away with things like when we had, I think we had some beer and wine left or whatever it was. And so the people that obviously organise events can take some of that away with them. So there are some rewards as well in that. So what I'm going to do then is perhaps move over to some panel discussions. I've got some questions here that I'm going to put to the panel. And then after that, as I say, I'll open that to the floor for questions from yourselves. So the first question, so what role could your church play in helping your community come together? And perhaps when we think about that, there are some sub-questions maybe a little bit underneath that. So how can rural churches help reduce isolation through things perhaps such as events, partnerships, informal hospitality? And I know from speaking to one or two of you and having been involved with one or two things, certainly that mine have done, there are some practical examples that hopefully will come out. So who would like to kick off on that one? Perhaps Lucy, about what you've done?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so myself and my colleague Lou both took part in the programme. And Lou joined the events that were really, I think, well, she said that there were lots of them, subjects came from the congregation, the participants themselves. So it was really responding and listening to what people would like to join as an event. I think you mentioned it, you know, some events can go down well, others not so much, and it depends on people's availability and the rest of it. But actually it's always the content. You want to make it relevant to the people that are going to come along. And hopefully they tell their friends, and it's word of mouth. I find that's the best way that these events travel, especially with building trust. I think the other thing as well is maybe the church as a space is wonderful, but if you've never stepped in here before, you know, how are you going to, you know, come along to an event that's about mental health potentially, or going on a walk? It's sort of just bridging that gap and offering that point of, that relationship building. So she really enjoyed, you know, delivering those sessions, and she said the ones on sleep, you know, thinking about how that affects everybody, and it's not thinking about mental health, I suppose. There's a whole spectrum, and it's keeping yourself well as much as you know, in times of crisis. So I suppose that's the end of health that we are at as well. It's that preventative, is looking after yourself, keeping yourself well, thinking of ourselves as, you know, community health and community resilience as much as our own individual health. So it's really nice to offer those workshops in a group setting. And I suppose I think about the walks. It's really nice to be able to either go on a walk or sit outside on a sunny day. I think we had a session as well just from the churchyard itself, and just explored and just sat in the sunshine and just took a load off and took a moment just to be present and not really thinking about, you know, a purpose as such. And that was really beautiful. But actually coming together as a community, as a group, and sharing that experience after is way more powerful than just doing it on our own. So I think that's what I find with the community projects we've got on, but also the events here, is just, you know, offering something for people to try and bringing people together to share about that, to build conversation, build connection, and build trust.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. And so what I'm going to do here is just put a bit of context on that. So we held monthly Your Connect or Your Cafe events here. And each Your Cafe event had a theme to it. And the original themes, when we kind of started on this route, so February perhaps a year ago, not this February before, we would have mind in there as support. And as you say, some of the subject will be on sleep. We had a wander around the place, but it was all based upon the fact that we had our server at the back. People would come in, it'll be informal, it's a Your Cafe type event, teas, coffees, cakes, chats, and that sort of thing. And that's how we try to kind of bring that event to life. And we are still running the Your Cafe events. With the theme, if you are interested in this, the theme next Wednesday would be a couple of duo singers that we have here that sing 50s and 60s stuff, which is really ideal for our demographics. You know, so it does go down pretty well. Thank you for that.
I wanted to go back just a step before that, if I may, and ask, as a church or as a community where you are, whether you go out and are looking and talking to people. Because what we know from our work with the agricultural sector is that isolation is really, really serious. If you can imagine, as a farmer, that your tractor is your office. You might have your coffee there, probably have your lunch there if you even stop. You do your phone calls there. Can you imagine what it's like being sat in there, in that glass box, for maybe 14 hours on your own, and if your mental health isn't great? So before you're going to be invited to go anywhere, what most of us do when we feel like that is we retreat. We go home, we shut the door. We don't want to talk. I certainly don't want to go anywhere where anybody else is going to be. So one of the things we do is we put up our Yana posters with our helpline on it at the back of churches. What it might do on a quiet Tuesday afternoon is to stop, looking for somewhere quiet and dark to stop. So what you will know better than anyone is what your friends and family are feeling like. That community, what do you do? They're all around here, all these fields that are being farmed, in terms of even just an acknowledgement. Possibly if they're stopped, to stop and have a conversation. That human interaction, that is where it starts. And I think all of us can do that. And I heard a lovely story recently of somebody who was feeling in that difficult, dark place. A friend came round, knocked on the door and said, "I haven't seen you a bit, come and have a pint." "No, you don't want to talk to me." I'm not, no. He said, "Come on, we'll just go." And they went to the pub, which they were able to find. The pub, in that case, was still in existence. And they just talked as friends. He went home. And he told us later how much better he felt, and that friend's interaction probably saved his life. It was as graphic as that to us. So as you're sitting here now thinking about those you know in the communities in which you live, you might want to bear that in mind in terms of that community that's out there, that's in the fields all around you, who are probably in some degree of isolation.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is very pertinent, and as you say, it's all around us, but we don't actually think about that. So thank you for bringing that to the fore. Thank you. So, Nigel.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I mean, picking up on what both Lucy and Robin have said, I think the importance of personal contact. We can create posters, we can send things out on Facebook, and we've tried all that. But I think the most effective means of engaging people, at least starting the ball rolling, is that personal contact. I mentioned the door-to-door survey that we did. That was a start of the process. I don't think we followed up quite as intensely on that as perhaps we could have done. But that's, I think, the main point, personal contact to build up that momentum. The other thing you mentioned, your cafes. I mean, we started off that programme with a sort of, sounds a bit grand, a sort of diagnostic cafe. We brought people together with a model of a cafe that enabled us to talk through what sorts of things could we do in this programme. And that proved, again, a very useful steer right at the beginning to developing the programme that we've referred to. That's all.
Thanks, Nigel. One of the things we do here to try and promote events, as Nigel said, social media, Facebook, that sort of stuff. But one of the key things we do, we have a quarterly newsletter. And the front of the newsletter is generally parish matters, and the back of the newsletter is always what we're doing here in our community hub, what events there are. And as Nigel said, the key to kind of engaging with people and encouraging them to come along to events is not just to put the newsletter through the letterbox, but to physically knock on the door, introduce yourself, and just highlight a couple of key things that they might want to go to. And that does make a difference. Thanks, Nigel. Did you want to add anything?
Well, I can add a little bit, I suppose, but only from the perspective of the Horsted Centre and our community events. I guess we've gone about trying to reduce local, rural, social isolation particularly, almost the other way around, in that I think our primary aim was very, very basic. We just wanted to share a little bit more about what we were passionate about and some of the resources that we have at this wonderful activity centre, particularly with the broader community. And that just happened to cross over with the church's only mission aspirations, which were to reach more people within their local parish, to share not just the wonderful space that they had, but also from a nature connectedness point of view as well, this wonderful churchyard and conservation area that they've got there more broadly, and through that build new relationships with new people in the parish. Now, the community events themselves, because we're very lucky with the Horsted Centre, we've got a real carrot there to offer, like abseiling and archery sessions for people to come in to do. So we're very fortunate that our events can attract families and new people through that lens. The extent to which they have reduced social isolation, being only once or twice a year, is up for debate, I think. And I think our next obvious step is, now that we have a series of popular events that are in the local calendar, to make sure that we are connecting more with local organisations who can truly do something about that, and perhaps offer something a bit more sustainable throughout the year when these events aren't on. Because these are one-off things, but there are organisations out there who are there to support people who are feeling that isolation and who specialise in doing that. Now, for us, I think the obvious next step is to continue with our events, but to involve more local organisations in attending those events who can offer something in the interim time. I hope that makes sense.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've heard a couple of things around partnerships, how that can work, and how it actually has worked here in practice. But it always goes back to a kind of a base of volunteers. So if I can maybe ask the question, how can we develop a strategy to develop the capacity so that we've got the capacity supports the active role in the community? So what I'm perhaps prizing out here is, what structures do we need to make these things happen? Now, Nigel touched upon the PCC, and then sitting beneath the PCC was the Haveringland Together group. The Haveringland Together group's responsibility was mainly about putting events on. And the kind of outcome of that would be people coming here, coming to events, word of mouth, and supporting the church financially as well. Because believe it or not, we never charged for our teas or coffees. We relied on donations, and we got a lot of donations. People are very generous. So I think it's a case of what sort of structure do we need in place to allow us to make these sort of festival churches effective and without avoiding burnout, and hopefully can stand the test of time. So I will perhaps come to you first, Nigel, because I know you've got quite a bit of background with that, which perhaps includes partnerships and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a key word, isn't it? I mean, getting that momentum going, I think, getting the critical mass of people involved is the starting point. And I think we have to be realistic. It will take time. I think we've discovered that. It's not immediate. It takes a long time, perhaps. And you've got to try and engage people in a way that, I suppose, makes sense to them, where they're getting something from this as well. There's a form of social interaction going on within that group, which I think is very beneficial to them directly as well. I think that's all I'll say at the moment. I think it's a question of, making a start, getting the ball rolling, and gradually spreading the word of mouth again, as well as some of the, the more modern social media and other mechanisms for communication.
Robin.
I couldn't help wondering, as we're sitting here, having listened to what Bishop James said earlier, what drove a community here of 22 households, I think she said, to build this place? Did they form a strategy and a group, or, where did it start? And I reflect on the places where I've been. It generally starts with one or two like-minded souls coming together and going, we're going to do it. And a certain degree of bloody-mindedness, because the bureaucracy will get in the way. And I talk, having done a Grade 1 listed building renovation, the biggest problem we had was Heritage England, the City of London Corporation, the bureaucrats. And you're going to face that. So the perseverance that we heard about earlier, you will need bucket loads of. But it comes, in my experience, from 2 or 3 and going, that's what we're going to do. And if you've got that and a vision and a sense of leadership, it moves. Don't wait. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. We're going. And I'd encourage you, if you're going to do that, just get together with 2 or 3 and move.
Thank you. And that's exactly what happened at Haveringland. And the catalyst for that was this man here on my left, who led the project, almost single-handedly managed the 500,000 or so renovation project. And as Nigel said, it did come from 2 streams. The Heritage Fund was mainly just about renovating the church, keeping it watertight and so on. And all the other stuff had to come from a separate budget and a separate income line. So big thanks to Nigel for that. But as he said earlier on, right at the beginning, when we started off this morning, pick his brains. He's got some great knowledge around, this man, he's got so much information about grants, how to obtain them, where to go for them, so on and so forth. And I know a lot of it is perseverance.
Yeah, I wanted to add something as well, that perseverance, but also the consistency. I find a lot when working in communities, and new communities especially, and also communities that are quite isolated and maybe rural, is that actually people are watching a lot of the time. So maybe they've had the newsletter through once or twice, maybe they've driven past to see how many cars are in the car park, or, but it's really getting that momentum in themselves, I think, to show up. And it might just take a lot of time. I mean, I've met someone a year ago and they showed up to something, a year later, let's say, and that was when they were ready. So I think that consistency, having spaces like this to hold events and host events is amazing, and it's, and other rural spaces, but it's, just showing up, whether it's once a week or once a month, just making that regular connection, because I think that we all need that in our diaries, to block it out, or make it so it's something that you can look forward to, or at least be able to share the date. So I think that's what I found, and especially with volunteers, they it fluctuates, right? But knowing that that's the regular slot that people can join and that you can share with others is really important.
Fantastic, thank you.
Not an awful lot extra to add, really, other than just to say that I agree with all of your points. But to encourage people not to feel overwhelmed by the big picture. I think it's important to have a big picture and to know what you want to achieve for your church and what you've got to offer and what you've got to share. But it does all just start with a conversation with 1 or 2 people. In our case, it was a conversation between me, the manager of the Horsted Centre, very, very busy in our own right, and Lucy, the head of our PCC chair, and somebody on the parish council, just saying, we'd like to do more about this. I then discuss it with my board. Lucy's very creative. She comes up with lots of ideas, and these things often explode out before they come back into a focal point. But it all just starts with a conversation, and then kind of opportunities and momentum build from that.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've now come to the time where I'm going to invite some audience questions. We have got a roving mic, please do use the mic, because as Andrew said earlier on, we are going to put this on YouTube. So thank you, Rick. We got one here? Oh yes, yeah, and there's of course that as well. There may be some hearing needs. So, gentleman there, thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much. I was going to suggest that one of the things we have to appreciate in community uses of churches is what level of competition the current trend for very large village halls provide. They compete not only for, and they're usually unfair, it's not a level playing field, they are also lottery funded. They compete not only for community activities, but also within a very limited pool of local volunteers. So if you've got a big village hall, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention in passing, I'm delighted you don't charge for your tea and coffee. You may like to consider charging for all of the other community activities here, because one of the implications of that is that you could register for VAT. And the gentleman there would appreciate, I assume you've had 20% added on your bills.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thought in passing.
Thank you. Nigel, did you want to respond to that? Or? No. Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Rick?
Yeah.
Okay, you've got one? Thank you.
Hold it to my chin. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
excellent. Just a couple of points really, which may lead to some comment, but we probably shouldn't underestimate the impact and the time that these sorts of projects have on volunteers. And I think Nigel would probably agree with that it is a significant investment of people's time and energies and efforts, and sometimes that's okay, but sometimes it's not okay, and it's quite daunting for churches. But I do think that's where the National Lottery Heritage Fund can help, and are supportive, and will encourage projects to look at fees for sort of project management and other professional roles. And churches very often are sort of a bit backward in coming forward in asking for money for those sorts of things. But I think good projects, deserve that kind of leadership, and also that takes the pressure off the volunteers a bit as well. So that's just one point. But also, it was very interesting, that conversation around the farming community and sort of agricultural workers. And I've done a lot of projects with churches, and I'm not sure that we talk enough actually to our agricultural community and understand what they need and how our projects can support them. We do a bit of that with certain services at times of the year, particularly around harvest, obviously. But actually, there's a much deeper conversation to have about how we can support our farming community, which is absolutely all around us and integral to Norfolk. Do we have good links with the RNAA, for example? I don't know. So that's raised a really interesting question. We should be doing more, I think, to, and particularly then partnering with Mind and our farming community in a place like this. There's an obvious connections there.
Thank you, Saul. I think points well made. Thank you very much.
Can I just respond a little on that? Just to say, I think also they're underestimated in terms of the can-do mentality of most farmers I meet. They're people who are used to, nobody else will do it, I've got to get on and do it. So in terms of people having bits of kit, how much can you do with a telehandler? A lot of that. So in terms of moving stuff, they're a resource, but go and ask them. You need to build the relationship.
Fantastic, thank you. Lady at the mic, thank you.
Hi. Just a quick question, really. You've done, obviously, lots of different engagement and put on lots of different events to try and get communities involved. Which do you think, out of all the things you've done, gave you the best results? What worked best? And would you then take forward and expand? Who brought more people to you?
Tricky one. I think it's sort of, in a sense, horses for courses. We've put on a wide range of things. We've had music performances which have proved very popular. I think we've had 50-odd people come along to a retro gig sort of thing, and that's started to generate some connections that might lead to other things perhaps. We've got the smaller groups, knitting and crafts and stuff like that. I think they're all successful in their own way, but I think they're addressing different needs. I think that's the point that comes across. If I could just come back on the earlier point about farming community, I mean, and this is very relevant to Helen, who will be speaking this afternoon, about a project that we've been involved with called Nature North of Norwich, which is all about taking a landscape scale approach to recovering nature, helping nature recover. And that involves farmers and landowners as well as a community. So there's an opportunity there, there's a connection being made through that work, which might enable us to engage with the farming community on some of these other issues that Robin mentions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
I've got a little bit to add to that, if I could.
Yep. Rick, just hold fire just a sec.
I'm so sorry. You said, what are the things that have worked the best? And for us, like all these things, we started off very small with our community events, but one of the most effective things that we did early on was to make sure that we recorded some of that, the early impact, the positive impact that these events had. And that certainly strengthened our argument when it came to applying for longer term, larger and more sustainable funding to keep the things going. So feedback from people who attended saying, it's a real breath of fresh air to be able to take the children somewhere that they don't, because we've made them sort of free to access. That there aren't very many events out there, affordable events out there for families during children's schools holiday. And so we took that testimony basically, and then we're able to use that to strengthen our argument that there's a demand for this kind of thing.
And I think that's a really good practical example.
Yeah.
You've identified the need and you've addressed it. Thank you. Thank you. Right, we have got quite a few. So the lady here, I know you've put your hand up a couple of times. So, okay, no, you'll go next. Okay.
I was interested in. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I was interested in the cafes that you run in the church. How often do you do them, and what sort of numbers would you have for the cafes? And also, what proportion of local people actually come and support, or are you finding that you're attracting a wider audience?
Okay. I can answer that, or Deborah, you can answer that, and because it does vary. So if I perhaps position where we were, what we originally did last year. So the Your Cafe events then, we would have probably between say 8 and 10. And this was last year, keeping in view that we kind of, I'm going to use the word mothballed here, but we mothballed activities in the church from January, February, March, because obviously it's very cold and people don't tend to want to go out when it's dark and the weather's not too good. And then we've just recently kicked it off again. But what we try and do is have something other than just Your Cafe there. And as I say, we are having, we've got a duo that come every third Wednesday in the month. And that tends to be quite popular. But I know, Deborah, you put obviously work into kicking it off again this year, and it's been a bit of a slow burner, if I'm really honest with you, this time round. So it's a case of persevering.
Do you find you have to have a regular date for that kind of event?
Yes. Right, it's generally all local support rather than people coming. Yes, yeah. Occasionally we've kind of people come through the door and they just happen to be in the area visiting, and they then obviously join us with a cup of coffee and whatever else. But it does tend to be locals, and it is. And we've gone for a specific day, i.e. the third Wednesday for that particular event. We also run a Your Cafe on the first Wednesday, and that's just come in, have a chat, tea, coffee, and just meet people really, as opposed to having an event with it. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. It's a sort of chicken... thank you. It's a chicken and egg situation, really. Picking up the thread of my colleague over there who said about the active village hall. If you've got a large medieval church as we have, it's very hard to justify having a kitchen and a loo put in. And we also had, when we did try and put a loo in, which we haven't finally managed, it has to be a half a mile. That's an exaggeration. But the other side of the graveyard, because it can't be internal to this beautiful building we've got. So how many of your activities can be justified for a lottery fund if you're only able to do external? We've got a very active friends group. We help to run an age concern group. We help with the charities, but they're all external. We cannot. Church, we managed to put heating in. We've got a loop system. We're very conscious, and we've adapted for the disability, but we can't put in a cafe or any facilities. So because the village hall is just across the road, and they have them all. So it's very hard for us to be able to argue in terms of fulfilling that criteria for a very large grant we need to replace the two side roofs.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how you achieved that aim on the
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I think in introduction, in a sense, we're lucky that we don't have a village hall or a community centre next door, and therefore we could provide this wide range of things. I think and it's a rather easy answer to your question, is I think you need to find your niche. How can you collaborate with that village hall and find areas of activity that you can both do well, but perhaps through collaboration rather than competing. I know we're all very different in our circumstances, and some areas have, as you've said, a village hall, others don't. Some are more, town-based rather than here in the middle of the field sort of thing. And it's really, I think, thinking through the vision which best uses what you can offer as a building, as a church, as a community.
Thank you. We'll have one last question and then I'll round off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And risk being asked to leave after asking this question, I was wondering, with the events that you've done and all the work you've done, do you ever find that it being held in the church is a hurdle for some people wanting to attend at all? And if that has been the case, how you've managed to overcome it?
Yeah, I think that was one of the other things I would say is a potential block for some people. They have a vision of a church building and all the associations that perhaps run with that. It's a bit like Bishop earlier was saying, it's about almost reinventing, or we're using the word reimagining, what that building can do. It's a new form of, I don't want to use the word religion, but it's a new form of worship, a new form of mental support that is not perhaps hung tied by the traditional things that go with the church. Being creative, I guess.
Yeah, and what we try to do to address that is to run events that we would hope would interest as many people as we could. So an example, we held a 40s in the Field event. We've had a couple of these where we've got a couple of singers at the front. Some people come dressed in the 40s gear. We have jeeps and tanks outside. So, and the reason we wanted to do that is primarily to get younger families involved. The kids would come along, they'd jump in the jeep and so on and so forth. But it's word of mouth, really, that then breaks that sort of barrier down, and people then come here and don't always recognise it as a church, even because obviously they may not be religious. They just see it as an event venue. And that certainly by putting different events on through word of mouth has certainly helped.
I was going to add that I only recently learnt that, of course, many of you may know this, but Cromwell stabled his horses in Norwich Cathedral. Norwich Cathedral, the nave space, was the largest meeting place in the city. That's what it was used as. Didn't have pews in it, didn't have chairs in it. It was a meeting place. The religious bit went up at the East End. So, again, that reimagining, how do we use it? If it's a community space, is it for a community? If it's tied into the religion, then yes, it may be a barrier to others. But that, I think, is how you present it and how you imagine it.
Fantastic, thank you. One last question or observation?
Historically...
Mike's coming. Yep.
Historically, what has this church been used for? I've just been thinking, Worstead Church is the size it is because it was used for storing the wool before it was sent abroad. So what was this church used for in the past? Have you developed that? As you said, for Norwich Cathedral, stored horses.
Thank you. I'm going to round the session off now because I'm sure some of you are hungry, particularly if you've travelled quite a way to get here. So first of all, thank you to our panel for sharing their experiences and the insight, and thank you to everyone who did contribute with the questions and reflections. We've heard today about the importance of partnership, the value of church buildings as a community asset, which is certainly what we see here and what we feel here, the need for sustainable structures, and the opportunities that exist in rural settings. We've tried to give some examples of that as well. Certainly, catch us during the lunch break. Now, rural churches may face challenges, but they also hold significant potential as places of connection, welcome and collaboration. And again, we've heard and seen some examples earlier on during the discussion. So, as we leave the session, perhaps each one of us can take away just one idea, one connection, and one practical step and way forward. Thank you for being part of this conversation, and enjoy the rest of the conference.